Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. In today's video, we begin a powerful, chilling, and unforgettable journey into one of the most iconic stories ever told. Let My People Go, the 10 Plagues. This is not just a story of ancient times. It's a tale of courage, oppression, faith, and unimaginable consequences. And the question we're diving into isn't just what happened, it's why it happened, and what it still means for us today. Imagine a land where the sun beats down endlessly, where golden palaces tower over dusty streets, and the cries of an enslaved people echo through the halls of power. Egypt, rich, proud, and unchallenged, stood at the height of its glory. But deep beneath its wealth and splendor, something dark was brewing. A clash was coming. Not just between a man and a king, but between the will of God and the stubborn heart of Pharaoh. And at the center of it all stood a single man, once a prince, now a fugitive turned prophet. Moses. This story isn't a fairy tale. It's raw, it's real, it's deeply human. Moses didn't ask for this mission. He didn't volunteer to stand before the most powerful ruler on earth and deliver a message that could get him killed. But the voice in the burning bush was clear. Go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And so began one of the most dramatic confrontations in history. In this first part of our 10 Plagues series, we're not just retelling a Sunday school version of the story. We're diving deep into the emotional core, the fear, the tension, the silence before each storm, the spiritual battle playing out in a very physical world. Each plague wasn't just a punishment. It was a direct challenge to the gods of Egypt, one by one, tearing down everything Pharaoh believed gave him power. But before the Nile turned to blood, before the frogs invaded the land, before darkness swallowed the sun, there was a warning, a simple, direct message. Let my people go. And Pharaoh said no. What happens when a man believes he's a god and refuses to listen? What happens when pride meets power and both refuse to back down? The first steps of the 10 plagues didn't come with thunder. They came with quiet defiance and the slow boil of justice rising. In today's episode, we'll meet Moses, not as a distant figure in a robe, but as a man with doubts, fears, and a destiny too big to run from. We'll see Pharaoh, confident, calculating, and cruel. And we'll step into ancient Egypt at the exact moment history was about to change forever. But before the first plague is unleashed, there's still a chance for mercy. One final opportunity for Pharaoh to choose peace over pride. The tension is thick, the air almost still. And as Moses raises his staff and speaks those unforgettable words, you'll feel it too. The sense that something enormous is about to break. So don't blink, don't skip, because everything that happens next will shake the very foundations of power, faith, and freedom. Stay with me as we begin this incredible journey into Let My People Go, the 10 Plagues. And just when you think you know how it goes, the real story might just surprise you. Long before Moses stood before Pharaoh, this story had already begun. In silence, in suffering, and in the cries of a forgotten people. The Israelites had once come to Egypt as guests during the time of Joseph, welcomed and protected. But generations passed. New kings rose, and the memory of Joseph faded. Fear replaced friendship. The Egyptians saw the Israelites growing in number and strength, and instead of seeing allies, they saw a threat. So they did what many rulers have done throughout history when power feels shaky. They enslaved them. Brick by brick, day by day, the Israelites were forced to build the wealth of a kingdom that no longer saw them as human. Their hands bled. Their backs broke. They prayed for freedom, but for hundreds of years, nothing changed. Hope was a dangerous thing. And yet, somehow, they still believed. They still whispered the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They still believed a promise had been made, that one day they would be free. And in the midst of that darkness, a baby was born. Moses should not have survived. Pharaoh had ordered every Hebrew baby boy to be killed, to keep the people weak and under control. But his mother, driven by love and desperation, placed him in a basket and sent him floating down the Nile, praying that somehow, some way, her child would live. He did. And not just live, he was found by Pharaoh's daughter, raised in the very palace of the man who wanted him dead. The irony is sharp. A Hebrew child, raised as Egyptian royalty, a slave by birth, but a prince by fate. For years, Moses lived a life of privilege, but something inside him never settled. He saw the injustice. He saw the beatings, the pain, the way his people were treated. And one day, his anger boiled over. He killed an Egyptian who was abusing a Hebrew slave. And suddenly, everything changed. He fled Egypt. He became a nobody in the desert. And for 40 years, Moses lived in silence. No staff, no miracles, just sand, sheep, and solitude. He had given up on being anything. Until one day, in the middle of nowhere, a bush burned without burning up, and a voice called his name. That's where the story truly turned. That's where the conflict really began. Not just between Moses and Pharaoh, but between obedience and fear, between faith and doubt. And as Moses made his way back to Egypt, carrying nothing but a staff and a command from God, he knew one thing for sure. There would be no easy path ahead. As Moses approached Egypt, the weight of what lay ahead grew heavier with every step. He wasn't just walking back into the land he once escaped. He was walking straight into a confrontation with the most powerful man in the world. Pharaoh wasn't just a king. In the eyes of his people, he was a living God. Challenging him wasn't just risky, it was unthinkable. But Moses wasn't coming alone. His brother Aaron would speak alongside him. And the message they carried wasn't their own. It was from the God of their ancestors. Still, how do you convince a ruthless ruler to give up a massive labor force? How do you speak truth to power when power doesn't care to listen? When Moses and Aaron first stood in Pharaoh's grand hall, the room fell silent. The gold, the guards, the cold stares, everything screamed authority. But Moses didn't flinch. He delivered the message, "Let my people go." Pharaoh laughed. He didn't believe in the God of slaves. Why should he? The Israelites were weak, crushed, easy to control. To him, this so-called God of Israel was invisible, powerless, and instead of loosening his grip, Pharaoh tightened it. He made the Israelites work harder. No straw for bricks, no rest, just more suffering. And now the people who had once hoped in Moses turned against him. "Why did you come here?" they asked. "You've only made things worse." Doubt crept in again. Had Moses misheard? Was he really the one for this mission? While Pharaoh hardened his heart and the Israelites lost faith, something greater was stirring beneath the surface. The stage was being set. The lines had been drawn. And though the first blow hadn't yet fallen, it was coming. Swift, strange, and unstoppable. The God of Israel was about to act. Moses stood at the edge of a storm he couldn't stop. Pharaoh's refusal echoed through the palace halls like thunder, cold, final, and full of pride. There was no reasoning with him, no appealing to his compassion. The enslaved Israelites were too valuable, his pride too thick, his heart too hard. But the warnings had been clear, and time was running out. Then came the first sign. The Nile River, the very heart of Egypt, turned to blood. Fish died. The water stank. The people panicked. But Pharaoh's heart did not soften. He watched with cold eyes, believing this was some trick, some illusion. His magicians tried to mimic the plague, and when they could, even in part, Pharaoh felt no fear. He simply turned away, but it didn't stop. Next came frogs, then gnats, then flies, wave after wave of disruption, covering the land, filling every home, making daily life impossible. Egypt, once clean and controlled, now swarmed with chaos. And still, Pharaoh refused. His pride became a wall, and behind it, the people of Egypt began to suffer. Crops failed. Animals died. Disease followed. The land groaned under the weight of judgment. But the Israelites? They were untouched. This wasn't just a display of power, it was personal. Every plague tore down a false god of Egypt. The Nile, the animals, the sky, the sun, each one represented something the Egyptians worshipped. And now all of it was failing. The tension grew with each new day. Moses returned again and again to Pharaoh, speaking the same unchanging words. "Let my people go." But Pharaoh would not bend. He couldn't. The fear of appearing weak was stronger than the suffering of his own people. And the warnings were almost over. Something darker was coming. Something final. And this time, no one would be untouched. Just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, a twist came that no one expected. Not even Moses. After the seventh plague, hail mixed with fire rained from the sky, destroying crops and livestock, shattering Egypt's confidence. For a brief moment, something shifted. Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron back in and said, "I have sinned this time. Pray to your God. I will let you go." It felt like a breakthrough. The people held their breath. Even Moses was stunned. Was this finally the end? But as the skies cleared and the hail stopped, Pharaoh's heart turned cold again. He had lied. He had said what Moses wanted to hear, just to stop the pain. And once the danger passed, so did his promises. This wasn't just about power anymore. It was about pride, manipulation, and control. Pharaoh wasn't backing down. And now something deeper was brewing. The next plague wasn't like the ones before. It wasn't loud or violent. It came like a whisper, like a shadow. Locusts, endless clouds of them, darkening the sky, eating everything the hail had spared. Every green thing vanished. Pharaoh's own officials begged him to let the people go. "Do you not yet see that Egypt is ruined?" they asked, but he only grew more stubborn. The more destruction came, the more he clung to his throne. And then came darkness, not the kind that comes with nightfall. This was a thick, choking blackness, so deep that people couldn't move. For 3 days, Egypt sat frozen in fear. Not a flicker of light, not a step taken. It was as if the very breath of the nation had been stolen. But even then, in the middle of all that terror, Pharaoh refused. Moses had followed every command. He had stood face to face with the most powerful man in the world, watched God perform wonders beyond imagination. And yet, nothing had changed. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. And just when hope felt farthest away, the final warning came. A message so heavy, so terrifying, that even Moses staggered when he heard it. One final plague, one final night. But this time, the cost would be higher than anyone dared to imagine. And there would be no second chances. The line between mercy and judgment was about to vanish. Forever. The night was still. No wind, no sound. Egypt seemed to hold its breath as the final plague approached. Moses had delivered the warning without shaking, but inside, even he knew this night would be different. It wouldn't be frogs or darkness or locusts. This time, it would strike the heart, the death of the firstborn. From Pharaoh's palace to the lowest servant's home, no house would be untouched, except for those who followed the command to mark their doorposts with lamb's blood, the sign of protection, of obedience. As the sun set, silence blanketed the land. The Israelites gathered in their homes, whispering prayers, clutching their children, waiting. No one slept. And then it began. A cry pierced the night, then another, and another. Across Egypt, a wail of grief rose like nothing ever heard before. From the richest homes to the smallest huts, the firstborn lay still. Even Pharaoh's own son, his heir, his pride, was gone. In the darkness of that sorrow, Pharaoh finally broke. He called for Moses in the dead of night, voice shaking with grief and fury. "Go," he said, "take your people, leave Egypt." And just like that, the chains of 400 years shattered. The Israelites, stunned, gathered their things and walked into freedom, while Egypt mourned behind them. The impossible had happened. The slaves had become a nation. Pharaoh's power had been broken. The plagues were over, or so it seemed. But then came the twist. As the Israelites journeyed out, hearts full of relief, a message reached Pharaoh. He sat alone in his palace, his grief burning into rage. He had let them go, but his pride couldn't bear the thought of losing to Moses, to the God of slaves. He changed his mind. He gathered his army, his best soldiers, chariots gleaming, and gave one final order: bring them back. So just as the people of Israel reached the Red Sea, they looked back and saw dust rising in the distance. Pharaoh's army was coming. The conflict wasn't over. The freedom they had just tasted now hung by a thread. The sea blocked their path. The soldiers closed in. And the question rose again. Would this God, who had brought them this far, truly finish what he started? The Red Sea stood like an unmovable wall in front of them. Behind them, the ground trembled under the weight of Egypt's war chariots. The people panicked. Cries filled the air. Some shouted at Moses, asking why he had led them out just to die in the wilderness. Fear returned like a wave, drowning out their short-lived joy. But Moses didn't panic. He lifted his staff and did the only thing he knew how. He trusted. Then the impossible happened. A strong wind began to blow. The waters of the Red Sea rose, split, and stood like walls on either side, revealing a path of dry ground. The people stared in disbelief, but there was no time to question it. They stepped forward one by one into the miracle. Hundreds of thousands walked through that sea, not as slaves, but as a free people crossing into a new identity. Pharaoh's army, blind with fury, chased them in. But the moment the last Israelite stepped out, the waters roared back to life. In seconds, the sea swallowed Egypt's finest soldiers. The threat was gone. The past was buried. On the other side, under the morning sun, the people stood in silence. Then a sound rose, not of fear, but of song. Moses' sister Miriam took a tambourine and began to sing. The people joined her. They danced. They cried. They praised the God who had not only heard their cries, but delivered them with power and mercy. The story had come full circle, from oppression to freedom, from silence to song. But freedom wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something greater. The wilderness still lay ahead. Trials would still come. But now they knew something they didn't before. They were not alone. The same God who turned rivers to blood, who sent plagues and parted seas, was with them. The story of Moses and the 10 plagues isn't just about miracles or judgment. It's about identity, courage, and the power of faith in the face of the impossible. It's a story that still speaks today, reminding us that no matter how deep the darkness, deliverance is always possible. And sometimes the path to freedom begins where we least expect it, right in the middle of the sea.